My name's Ciara and I survived a serial. I was born in Dunleary, a little town in Dublin. I moved to Manchester in the United Kingdom when I was 3 with my parents, my older brother and my older sister. So there was 4 of us. So the tribe continued to grow. I left the nest quite young. I left the nest at 15. So around 21, I was living in Manchester. I was waitressing. That's kind of the work that I was into. I had a good circle of friends. I had my own property and I had my own little dog. I wasn't scared to walk the streets of Manchester. Like, I didn't always look over my shoulder and get scared. I was just comfortable walking the streets of Manchester. I've lived there most of my life. On the night that I was attacked by the serial, I'd previously left my other job to start this new job, and it was my first day there. Like, my friends was drinking. It's in the summertime, like, come round, let's celebrate, have a few drinks. So I was like, yeah, okay then. But on that night, like, obviously they'd been drinking through the day, so they was a bit wavy, and I was sober. And being a waitress, you're on your feet. I'd just done like 10-hour shift. I'm yawning and I'm thinking, right, I'm gonna go home. And like, all my friends was like, no, stay. But I had to be in work the next morning as well, so I didn't really want to mess up my new job. I phoned a taxi and I was like, right girls, like, I'm going. And I gets in this taxi, and I've always used this taxi firm, and it's £3.50 off the meter just down the road, and he asked me for £20. So I was like, okay then, gave him £20. And I'm getting weird vibes off him because the taxi driver then goes, oh no, I want another £20. And I'm like, no, like, this isn't right. It's like, it's just round the corner. So I was like, you know what, forget it, mate. I'm gonna walk. I don't like your attitude. So I've walked down this road many times because my friend lives not far from it. I feel safe. I've walked this early hours in the morning. So I'm walking down, like, I tried to phone my other friend, but she must have been asleep because it was like 11:45 at night. As I'm on my phone, I just feel loads of these pressure to my face, punches, like I'm getting absolutely punched in the face. But I'm like, am I imagining this? And I just remember saying, this is not happening to me. And as I've turned, I've seen a guy, and he had like a balaclava there and covered his hair, but I could see his piercing blue eyes, and that's all I seen. So I started screaming, and he like started dragging me into the middle of the road, put his hand over my mouth, and then all of a sudden I felt like, quite wheezy and like sleeper. And he threw me on the road, and I felt like I'd been asleep for a few seconds. And then when I woke up, like, he ripped all my top open, like my bra had come off. I'm thinking, am I getting robbed? Like, I was on the floor and I was saying to him, look, just take the money. You do not have to do this. Like, my face was swelling. I was in so much pain. I thought I was dripping in sweat, and it wasn't. It was actual blood. I gave him the money, and he put it in my handbag and said, it's not about the money, it's about teaching little like you that they can't walk the street with men like me. At this point in my mind, I thought, okay, I know what this is about. This is not a mugging. The guy wants a piece of me, not a piece of my money. So, like, I'm struggling with him, and he's smacking me, and he's biting me, and he's trying to rip my pants down. And what I didn't know at the time was he was putting chloroform over my mouth, but my body kept coming around quicker than, say, if they did it to someone else, because I'd been through previous trauma. So, like a boxer that gets in a ring, I could keep getting back up, but it was like I was drunk because I kept stumbling and, falling over. He could see the cars going past, like, so, they were spooking him. So he dragged me into the bushes by my hair and was, like, trying to throw me on the ground, and, like, was trying to take my pants off to me. I wasn't strong enough to fight him back, so I was trying to come up with excuses, just like, if you stop hitting me, like, I'll agree to do what you want, just like, stop hitting me. All I kept thinking in my mind is, I need a plan. I need to, like, distract him, but I can't run that way and I can't run that way. My best bet is the main road. If I run, I might get hit by a car, but what's the alternative? I think he kind of guessed that my train of thoughts, and he smacked me in the side of my temple and put my hair down. I was too weak by this point. I was physically too weak. I would have just had to take whatever he was gonna do to me. But the street that I was on, you can drive down it, but you can't drive up it. It's a one-way street. And a driver on this main road hasn't realised that, and he's gone to drive up the road that I was on, and their headlights are beamed, like, in our direction, but he's not seen us. The man that was attacking me, he kind of like, and in that moment, that gave me that opportunity that I'd been looking for in that whole 40 minutes of the ordeal. It gave me the opportunity, and I just went like that to him. And I smacked him in the face, and he went down. And then I started running across the road, bearing in mind I've got no shoes on, I've got no clothes on the top, I've got no bra, I've got no t-shirt on, my pants are all ripped. So I'm naked, and I'm knocking on people's doors, and people are coming to the window, and they're like, no, go away, go away. But like, hello, I'm a woman, I'm on her own. And then I remember going round the corner, and instead of knocking, I just tried this front door, pushed it down, and thankfully this front door opened, and I just stumbled in, fell on the floor, and this woman came running out, and she was screaming, and like, he took my phone, he took the contents of my bag, a provisional driving license in there, letters in there, and a phone. So he took them, but left my purse and left my money. So I didn't have a mobile to like ring anyone, but I knew my dad's number off the top of my head. So I was like repeating my dad's number, saying, I've been attacked, please phone my dad. And she kept saying to me, don't touch anything. And I was thinking, why is she telling me not to touch anything? Because remember, I thought I was sweating. It wasn't. I was full of blood. I passed out. As I woke up, the paramedic was a male, and he was leaning over me. So I've started to kind of like attack, saying, no, please just leave me alone now. Stop hitting me, stop hurting me. And they didn't know, what I was going on about. So then they had to sedate me, bring me to hospital, where I found out my eye socket was broke, my jaw was fractured, my nose was broke, all the blood vessels in my eye was popped. I had broken toes, bite marks all over me, bruises around my neck from where I'd been strangled, practically bruises over every part of my body. My dad was poorly at the time, so he couldn't come to hospital. So my mum come to the hospital and met me outside. Obviously, she was like distraught because like my face was just so swollen. And then when I got into the hospital, the police was informed, this girl has been, seriously injured. And then I remember waking, up through one of the scans, and them saying like, the serious crime squad are outside from the police. They need to talk to you. And, they took my clothes, as evidence. You go through a statement with the police, and they're trying to get all the evidence they can, and like looking into like, did you know him? Like, where was it? And then they wanted to bring me onto a ward, trauma ward, to have an operation done on my eye, but I discharged myself. I didn't want to stay in the trauma ward. Everyone kept whispering. I think the first thing you think of when you see a woman with a face that's battered is, oh, is she getting knocked about at home? And then they said that the operation would leave me with a scar from one end to there and one end to there. And because I've got a dint in my bone, I can actually put my finger in my bone. I didn't want the operation because I don't want every time someone, you speak to someone new or you go for a job, they're going to be like, oh, hey, what's happened to your face? Or like, if I get a job and the scar could have been so visual that, they might not want to give me a job. Just stuff like that. So it's nothing to do with vanity. I just didn't want to always be asked every single time, hey, what happened to your face? And then have to keep going through it and keep going through it. And that was the reason that, I refused the operation. I do suffer for it now in the winter, but what can you do? My parents said, come and live back at home. I was like, no, I'm going back to my flat. I was running on autopilot, you don't really think at the time. The man's got my address. He's got my phone. I went back home. I went to the city centre, to the SIM provider, to get my number back. I bought a new phone, and I put my SIM card in the phone. I'm getting ping text messages. I've got voicemail straight away. It's starting to ring. And I'm thinking, I'm not this popular. No one knows yet, apart from, my family. And like the girl that I was with the night before, like picks up the phone. I'm like, hello. The drugs were still running through my system. And this man is shouting at me down the phone. And I'm like, whoa. And he's like, why are you texting my girlfriend, telling my girlfriend that you're going to call with weapons and you're going to attack her and you've been stalking her on Facebook? And I'm like, whoa, you've just described what's happened to me. And they was like so confused, because I think not many people know or didn't know at the time is, even if you lose your phone and you lose your SIM card, you can still retrieve your number. And then the man that had my phone, he then can no longer use that SIM card because I've got the number back. And then I'm listening to voicemails from girls saying, how dare you like text me and say you're gonna me, and all these vicious things. And then I've got text messages of young girls' dads and mums who stopped stalking my daughter on Facebook. So I phoned the police and I was like to the police, look, this person's obviously is using my phone. Here's the details of my phone. Like, you need to find the phone, you need to speak to these people, you need to read the text messages. They went away, took my phone again to take all the evidence off my phone. Then the next day I went in and did a police interview for about 3 hours, where you have to go into every single minute detail, reliving it, not 24 hours later, with a female officer. Was humiliating and, quite degrading. But also because there was a male police officer there, it made me squeamish and like I felt dirty, like talking about it. I just had to think, right, you're not talking about yourself, like you're talking about someone else. After that, the police keep checking in with you and, they phone you and they say like, we're doing all we can. We're coming up with some links and like, we're looking at CCTV. Unfortunately, you've got no DNA evidence of another person on you, so we can't go off DNA. And then in the September, so a couple of months later, I was still working with the police to try and catch this man. In the middle of September, the police officer who was dealing with the case phoned me and they was like, we've got him, we've caught him. So I was like, oh my God, thank God. And they was like, Ciara, this is just the beginning of the story. Like, this is way more complex than our whole force team could have even imagined. So I was like, I know it's serious what happened to me, but like, what do you mean? He was like, he's a serial. The blood just, went from my body, and they said, he's been doing it for months and you are one of 6 victims. I always say I'm the lucky one out of them all. I come away with being somewhat assaulted with a horrific physical injuries, but mental injuries. These women was brutally, not just by him, by weapons. He didn't have a specific look to go for. One of the women was the same age as my mum. I was only 21 at the time, and then you've got all different age groups in between it. I later found out he'd attacked a woman after me a week later, 2 streets from where I lived. She'd lost her child's father the night before, so she'd gone to visit his family and was walking down a reservoir near where we lived, and she was brutally attacked. Like, she lost all her front teeth. Like, she was only a couple of years older than me. He actually tried to kill her. He choked her and threw her in the reservoir. Woke up the next morning and Googled woman dead in, Debdale Reservoir, and it come up 0 searches. So the next night he went out and did it again. She had a locket had writing on it of her child's father and a lock of his hair. She never got that locket back. He won't reveal where he got the locket. And then the police said the final victim, this was the one that was my mum's age. She was attacked outside a pub on a phone while he was attacking her. Her screams had alerted a bypasser who managed to pin him down, was covered in her blood, and he tried to tell the bypasser he'd actually just fought off her attacker and was trying to help her. Not with your pants down your legs, you're not trying to help her. And that's how he was caught, and that's how the whole thing just comes spiralling out, that he'd stalked me. It's not as if he glanced and thought, oh, there's that woman. He'd stalked me while I was walking home for the 10-15 minutes it was taking me to walk home. He was at a petrol station and he parked his van up, and you can see him running, round the long way to hide in the bushes waiting, and you can see me on my phone. There's no CCTV after that. That's how they knew how long the attack had gone on for, because then you can see him running back up, jumping in his van and driving off. It was 40 minutes long where the ordeal was going on for, and then found receipts because he said that wasn't him. His mum actually said he was at home with her at the time of me being attacked. He's called in Manchester the textbook It was on front of every major newspaper in England at the time. My mobile phone was found in his girlfriend's knicker drawer at her flat. She knew nothing about it. Then his parents' property was raided by the police. In his bedroom was a bookshelf lined up with all these books. How to asphyxiate women, how to women, the best way to women, the best injuries you can inflict on a woman. All these sadistic books, maybe 10, maybe 12 books, was all lined up. And that's how he got his nickname, the textbook. When the police came and showed me them pictures, I could not believe what I was seeing. The worst part of it was his mum stood there so blasé and went, I bought him them books, like, what's the problem? Okay, what's the problem? Everything that them books was about is what he did to me and 5 other women. So she gave him the tools to commit the crimes that he committed. Not one of them books was not related to what he did. You know, this man was training to be a paramedic. He knew about chloroform. This man also at the same time was working in a primary school, a children's school as a cleaner. This man was also cautioned 2 years before for going around the streets and flashing his bits at women. This man came from a very, very privileged background. He thought we was lower than him. He's above us in society. So after the police came and told me what he'd done, they gave me his name and he denied everything in interview. They actually had pictures of him leaving his girlfriend's property in a lift in the same clothes on the same night that he went out to attack me. Now, if you remember, his mum gave him an alibi to say that it was, you know, he was at home and he was in bed. They say, right, he's going not guilty. You're going to have to go to trial. You're like, oh, okay, I've been attacked. You know, I've got all these injuries. In between that time, I developed an eating disorder. So I lost 8 stone. So I'm no longer 15 stone. And then we go to court and I think I spent 4 days on the stand being interrogated by his defense lawyer who called me a liar, said I was making up stories. Yes, he was there, but he was trying to help me. Why don't I just, stop telling lies? They make you feel absolutely disgusting. Victims get treated like they are the ones that have committed the crime by, lawyers and the people that work in the courts. We're meant to be the victims. So yeah, I stood on the stand for 4 days and, I backed my own and I didn't back down and said, I'm not lying. Like, no one else could identify him. And he was saying, how can you identify him just by his eyes? Like, literally no one else knew what he looked like. And even though it was only his eyes, if they were a piercing colour, you'll never forget him. His family are sat in front of me and, they're turning around, calling us lying little slags. And, they're allowed to sit right next to us and they're allowed to call us names and they'll get a bit off the police, don't do that, like, don't speak to him, a little bit of telling off. He was trying to put me off, like, because the court case lasted 6 weeks. You wasn't allowed to sit in when the other girls was giving, evidence, but I'd sit outside the courtroom every day for 6 weeks. And if I was allowed to sit in the courtroom, like, I wasn't going to be run out. Like, you violated me once, you're not going to violate me twice. I am sick of being called a liar by all these people that think you're better than me in life because you've got more than me in life. I don't deserve to be treated that way because I made a choice to not be scared and walk down a street in my own city. I do know why he went not guilty, because predators like him like to relive it. He sat in that courtroom and every time one of us sobbed, he'd smirk, or you could hear him sniggering. He loved it. He was getting off it. He wanted to relive it, creeper. The court case ended and we go back the next day and within 2 hours, the verdict was back. So everyone's rushed back into court. Now remember, I'm victim number 4. He was up on 13 charges altogether, from rape to attempted murder. There was 4 charges on me. So you have to start from the first victim. So the jury woman got up and she started saying, we find him guilty. And like, it gets to mine and I'm still doubting myself, like, just with my luck that they'll find him not guilty on mine. And I remember hearing that one first guilty and I remember jumping up, crying and saying, I can't listen to anymore. And the police officer sat me down. He said, no, Ciara, you need to listen to it. Like, you need to hear that he's been found guilty. And whatever way I've gone to sit back down, he's glanced at me and he's just gone. If I got found guilty on every single 13 charges that were brought up against him, when he was led away, he was emotionless. 6.5 weeks after the verdict, you go back for a sentencing day. His family should have realised, look, he's guilty. We already knew he was. So their family know all that. But yet they went back and still supported him on the day he was sentenced. And what the judge said was the most scariest thing about Adam Downworth is that if any woman seen him, even at 12 o'clock at night, you wouldn't think, wow, he looks so scary. Let me cross the road. And when he spoke in that courtroom, he was like a little mouse. He's got two sides to him, Jekyll and Hyde. The one that he saves for court and the one that he's shown us. And the judge sentenced him to a life sentence. He has to serve 29 years in prison before he can come up for parole. But the story of Adam Downworth doesn't end there. In 2019, I had my baby by emergency C-section. My baby was 5 weeks old. And my partner came in and said to me, Kaz, I've got something to show you. Adam Downworth is front page news again. He's front page news because his brother is a offender who's been grooming 11-year-old girls online, sending them explicit photos, getting them to send him photos, saying the most disgusting things. He walked out of court. He didn't even get sentenced. He didn't even go to prison. He got a caution. I met a prison officer. You see, when you commit them sort of crimes, you can't live on a normal wing in jail. You can't mix with the regular population. So he goes on to a vulnerable wing. So I met a prison officer who I told a bit about what happened to me. And he was actually a prison officer that used to put this Adam Downworth behind the door in prison. And the most sickening thing that I found, he's allowed our evidence pictures and he's allowed our statements. So he's allowed to sit there looking at my face and 5 other women's faces, getting off on what he's done. He showed his cellmate. 2 weeks later, his cellmate killed himself because of what he was showing him, because it was that disgusting what he did to us. I've got past it to a certain extent. Speaking out has brought it back up. I will always have nightmares and I'll always be on my guard now. I'll never be that carefree girl that isn't scared to walk down the streets. So the way that I want to get my control back and get over my trauma is to help other victims, whether it be female or male, because there's not a lot of people, that do come forward because maybe they don't think they're going to be believed or it's too harrowing to go through just sitting there talking about it, let alone going to court. I want to be someone's voice. Don't matter how painful it is for me. I've been there, I've done it. I'm still going to live with a mental trauma anyway. So why not find a voice for someone to maybe see me online and say, you know what? This has happened to me. I want to report that person and I'm going to be strong enough to do it. I'm sharing my story with you because social media now is the thing. Everyone's on social media. There's a lot of young girls online that, these predators do, contact online. This is how they seek you out. I want to speak out publicly just for someone to hear my story, for someone, even if they have gone through it, to know, you know what, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Like, you're not a liar. You don't have to just be a victim. We might be moving on, but we don't forget. My aim goal is I'm going to keep shouting Adam's name. I'm going to keep getting Adam relevant. Adam Downworth is never going to forget me for more reasons than one. And I'm going to make sure the world never forgets him. Then his brother went on to grooming girls online. So, his family know what they're doing. There's a lot of men out there that know what they're doing. We do have girls that don't really understand what's going on and, need to hear stories like mine. And, if one person comes forward and that's through me, I've won, I've made it in life. That's my goal. I want people to remember this one thing. It's not their fault. It wasn't my fault and it's not their fault. No matter who tells you and who makes you believe it, and when they get inside your head, it's not your fault. Find your voice and speak. So my life right now is happiness and chaos, and I've got a 2.5-year-old. He's got autism, so he's a bit more of a firecracker than a toddler, but he's so loving, he doesn't stop. Yeah, I've recently got engaged to my long-term partner. I'm going to teach my little boy, people will stand up for you. Because unfortunately with my little boy with having autism, he can't speak quite yet, and maybe he never will. But mummy will be your voice for you. Mummy will be your voice. So thank you so much for watching my story and listening to me. And I really do hope, if you're watching this and you've seen what I've gone through and maybe you've been through it, find something positive out of my story. Find your strength and just remember that you matter. No matter what you go through doesn't define you. If you've been through it, you find your peace like I have and your happiness like I have.